And so it's just this whole biofeedback loop. And I can really speak to this from that personal perspective of passion and self-acceptance. I experienced it. I know what it's like to have a completely dysregulated gut, environment and be under tremendous amounts of stress and feel so awful. Here I am on the other side. My gut environment is fantastic. Life stress still happens. I mean, I'm a surgeon, I'm on call. There's outcomes, complications. We're talking about money. We're talking about, all these other things. Life still happens. Nothing about my life has really changed, but my internal environment, my ability to have resiliency has increased 100-fold.
Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day, to have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward. How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want, to be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Today's quote is from Warren Buffett. When a person with money meets a person with experience, the one with experience ends up with the money, and the one with the money leaves with the experience. Today, you're in luck. We're going to share someone who's got experience with their gut and the microbiome and health, and you get to keep your money. The reality is the health of your gut goes far beyond just digestion and regularity. The microbiome is full of trillions of microorganisms that live in our intestines, and it has an astonishing influence on our overall health. From impacting our immune functions to metabolism to regulating moods and emotions. Our gut health determines more than we've ever understood before. There's actually a gut-brain connection, and we're going to chat today about how to optimize that and how diet, lifestyle, and environment affect that. I'm thrilled to have Dr. Erika La Vella joining us today. She's a bariatric surgeon who is passionate about functional and integrative approaches to health. She'll share some insights from the latest research, along with practical strategies you can use to heal your gut and enhance your physical and mental well-being. Let's meet her and dive right in. Welcome to Richer Soul, Dr. La Vella. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you so much, Rocky.
I'm excited to learn from you. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Growing up, I learned that money was important, but money was something that you don't really talk about. I learned about my dad investing in the stock market, and I learned that money was a commodity to be saved. In order to have security, you needed to save it. But I also grew up with a very skewed relationship of how to spend your money with joy. And so scarcity was, I would say, an overarching theme, and never feeling like we had enough. And so one of my, I would say, reasons for, wanting to have a better education, better career was to not really have to worry about money. So it's helpful. So I've been learning a lot about money as I've been going through my career, going from, as a resident, earning pennies to the dollar for my time. And then, also putting time and how I spend time and how I pay with my time, right up there with water and money and shelter.
And the funny thing is, they don't talk about money in medical school or in residency or anywhere along. And I understand parts of it, but at the other end of the spectrum, medicine represents 20% of GDP. If it's that much, I think the people in medicine should at least have an idea of financials and money.
Yeah. It's kind of a tricky position because, we're vulnerable. Healthcare education now costs a ton of money. And then you graduate in a lot of debt. And then you have to really navigate and you have to really learn about money, about, time. It's very easy to get burnt out. It's very easy to feel entitled. It's very easy to, again, not value the things that kind of really matter. And so, yeah, I think that could be a whole separate podcast, honestly. It's just how we navigate that and how we learn about that. I see several books there on your shelf that I also have on my shelf.
Which ones?
Charlie Munger's Almanac, and you have Intelligent Investor. And I think I see another Buffett book back there behind you. But yeah, Warren Buffett has been a huge source of my financial education, reviewing his philosophies over time and just how financial situations change, interest markets, inflation. It's been really good. And then do you have Rich Dad, Poor Dad back there?
It's somewhere else.
Yeah. That was another very helpful one for me.
Yeah. Warren clearly knows how to make and keep money. And so from that standpoint, you can't argue with him. It's funny, though, how at different points he is vilified. When the tech bubble was running, he was vilified at other times. And people don't realize that he's got this amazing power to say no.
Exactly.
He also lives well below his means.
Yep.
And he's clear on what he wants. I think that what I've been kind of in tune lately is with Munger, is creating mental models of how to look at situations and how to think. Because the reality is most people don't critically think anymore. And just it's a skill to learn and to master as we go through. And I do I've been very involved in the healthcare system in my previous life. And so I understand all of these money situations, the societal expectations for doctors, the inside expectations of what you can and can't talk about with money, and also what targets you are for the financial space, because you're all busy doing what you're doing and it doesn't involve that part of it. And that kind of brings the whole problem together.
Yep. All of the above. Living beyond your means because you feel entitled to it is a common thing. And then you're just constantly chasing your tail in a rat race.
Have you read White Coat Investor, James Dahl?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I know James.
Very familiar with his podcast as well.
Okay. Very familiar as well. So that's probably your best place to learn from that. Just background. So you became a doctor. What's your specialty?
My special is bariatric surgery and general surgery. So anything basically from the neck down. If it's skin deep, I can do it. If it involves an abdominal organ, I can do it. But my primary specialty and what brings me so much joy is weight loss, metabolism, and helping people who are overweight completely overcome, critically think. That critical thinking piece really comes into play here because of our society, and the whole greed and marketing and agricultural play and what we're advertised in terms of food. And, the weight loss industry is just full of a bunch of misinformation and quick fixes. And reality is we have to become masters of our own physiology, masters of our own biology, masters of our own choices. And yeah, I'm pretty excited to be a bariatric surgeon.
Why do you think we have such an obesity problem, not only in America, but now it's throughout the world?
It's not just one thing. I would say from a physical activity standpoint, just our technological advances, our sedentary jobs, our television habits. We really sit a lot and we never really used to sit. And then on top of that, definitely our hyperconsumption of processed foods. And that goes everything from the chemicals that our livestock is fed, the lack of fresh vegetables, beans, lentils, rice, everything comes processed in a way that makes it convenient for us to use. And then all over the world, you're seeing this rapid adoption of the Western fast food scene. So like the Middle East right now has some of the highest rates of obesity, and it's climbing. And my clients that are, from that part of the world, Saudi Arabia, will say it's a status symbol. So it's a status symbol to actually go to McDonald's and bring McDonald's back. And so we're just seeing a lot of cultures where people eat a variety of things, carbs, fat, protein, it's all on the table. But when it comes from just a really highly processed environment and it's not, made with time, with love, with mastery, we just get further and further from it.
And that's true. I've always said your diet begins in the grocery cart, right? And the other thing is, and I don't know how much people talk about this because I'm just not in those spaces, but shopping the U of the grocery store. Up the vegetable aisle, across the meats in the back, down the dairy and out. There's no reason to step in the middle.
Exactly. I mean, except for coffee.
Coffee, yes. I won't disagree with you.
It's a compounding problem because with every generation, you then get these epigenetic changes. And so, I think women have a lot of power because we carry our children and then we eat and nourish our babies in utero. And throughout all of these different life changes and the opportunities to grow and grow new cells, depending on the chemical environment that's in our body, we're really setting our children up for, habits that feel subconscious, that feel beyond just the choice in front of you. I know plenty of my patients who, they're busy parents, they're tired, they're exhausted. It's so much easier to turn on the TV and tune out and put a bag of chips or a frozen meal in front of your kid than it is to have the energy to then make the right choices in the healthy food. So community, all those things, it's a very complicated problem.
Not to mention processed food tastes great because they've gotten very good at creating flavors that the human body craves.
Yep. They call it hyperpalatable. So hyperpalatable, nutrition poor.
It is. But even if we try to be natural, I think that is still a struggle because most of the stuff showing up in the grocery store has also, even if it's so-called natural, still been highly processed, whether it be gene manipulation, chemicals in the feed, what the animals are actually eating that we're eating. And that creates another issue. So how do you overcome that?
Well, I love to think about these problems from very complex and also rudimentary means. So, what were our great ancestors eating? Homesteading, which is hard to do, but that was a lot more common of a practice. Your chickens were free ranging. Chickens breed very easily. Chicken is very inexpensive meat. And you would have a fresh chicken, once a week or however often it was. There's so many things to gain from the advances that we've made. But yeah, there's a big consequence too. So I personally live in Corvallis, Oregon. I chose this spot on this map because we have some of the richest diversity in organic farms. We have a large farmers market that happens twice a week. Most of our local grocery stores, including Safeway, which is a, nationwide brand, locally sources stuff from our local farms. We have a really good local meat market. And, so there's meat farmers, there's goat co-ops, there's chicken co-ops, there's, beef. And so just being really conscious, I would say, of where your food comes from, and then trying to look beyond your supermarket, or at least read where the food is coming from in your supermarket, is a really good place to start. There's some really neat companies out there now that do even, nationwide meal delivery services. And, you just have to be a little bit of an educated consumer to find where the good stuff is.
That you do. So let's take that step back to looking at the prenatal and then along with that kind of generational health, because some of the stuff I've been reading, things that they're talking about, is even when you look at people's faces and their jaw lines and what's happening generationally, our jaws are receding because we're not chewing. All of a sudden, everyone needs their wisdom teeth out because they haven't had that. I actually have. I don't know if you've seen this. It's mastic gum.
Oh.
And it's literally designed so that you can chew throughout the day and have a little bit more of to help build that natural rhythm back and make the change.
I eat lots of kale.
Okay. I'd love to hear what are the different stresses that come prenatally and also kind of being passed down now from generation to generation with bad food.
Yeah. So there's always two sides to every coin, right? So just like we can be overfed, nutritionally poor, high calorie diet, which can lead to obesity. They say obesity can lead to inflammation, but I think when you really look at it from another step back, it's the inflammation in the chemicals that we're eating. And all inflammation is just a chemical reaction that then creates more protons, more inflammatory molecules in the body. But it's so hard to just answer this with one sentence. But so generationally, something as simple as even famine. So, out of World War II, out of the, Great Famine in Ireland, drought-stricken regions, when there's food scarcity, that also has a biological imprint onto the next generation being more programmed to absorb more calories from their food. And so you see coming out of, Ashkenazi Jewish population, which is studied a lot in healthcare, because they're really high risk for celiac disease. They're really high risk for autoimmune disease. They're really high risk for certain cancers. And they can trace it back to their lineage and the amount of trauma and famine that specific, genetic population has experienced over the last, several hundred years. And then there's even been a microbiome study. Microbiome is the bacterial organisms that live in your body that help genetically create material for your body to use. So in medicine, I was taught about the Krebs cycle and, your own genetics and, what you're genetically at risk for based off of your own personal genome. But what the microbiome science is showing us is that the bacteria in our body and the environment that they're in, they actually have the capacity to turn on or turn off genes within your own genome. And because every cell in the human body only lives a certain finite period of time, all of our cells have to replicate copies of themselves to take its place. So that's the part of aging, is where all of our cells that we were born with are now different as we age. Red blood cells live 120 days. Your liver can regenerate in as little as 90 days. So some of them are on the timeline of days, some of them are on the timeline of years, but your body is constantly regenerating and regrowing. So every time a cell has to make a copy of itself, depending on the environment in which it's in, it can then either cause cancer, cause inflammation, upregulate something, or downregulate something. And so taking all of this together, when we're in utero, depending on what the mother is experiencing, depending on what the mother's previous genetic ancestry is, and now the combined genetic, information coming from the father, there's just a lot of environmental variables that can now dictate healthy or unhealthy.
Not so easy.
It's very complicated.
Let's try and make it a little bit simpler. So one of the things that has kind of dramatically shifted also, and I'm aware that there's a lot of positives to it, if we've gotten away from vaginal birth. which actually the whole purpose of it, I was told, in a sense, is also to essentially line the baby with all of those bacteria and kind of set it up for life. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. I just remembered the one thing I was going to say about the last bit, which is, so this was a rat-based study. They had fed the control group, didn't get any antibiotics. The other group got penicillin. 2 generations later, without changing any other variables, the antibiotic-fed mothers' pups were obese, eating the same diet as the non-penicillin-fed mother.
So the antibiotics changed the biome, or they set off genetic?
They think it impacted the genetics.
Interesting.
Very interesting. So again, this is just where we're just observing, we're extrapolating. We don't necessarily have exact mechanisms, but all of these different little pieces kind of help shape the complexity and the story about what's maybe impacting us. Take it back to antibiotics. Our livestock are fed antibiotics routinely.
They are.
I heard another story recently about in India, the cows are so sacred.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't eat cows, and they're trying to keep cows alive just because they love cows so much. And they have these large burial pits for these cows. Vultures, natural vultures, will then feed on the cows. And that's how they do this kind of ritualistic, sacred cow burial. Well, the vultures were starting to die, and there wasn't enough vultures to eat the cows. And they're like, why are vultures dying? They found out that the vultures, just by eating the dying cows, which is normal, vultures can eat everything dead and decaying. That's like their role on the planet. But the cows were being fed anti-inflammatories like our ibuprofen. And the vultures were actually getting sick and dying because of their biological magnification from eating all of the ibuprofen metabolites in the cows. So again, I'm just telling stories to help spark little things in your brains. When it comes to C-sections, you have to remember C-sections are a gift. They save a lot of babies. They save a lot of mothers. They are an absolute gift. And a byproduct of this gift is, just as you pointed out, the mother's flora. The flora is another word for bacteria, but hormonally, they change throughout pregnancy. And right before a baby is born, the vaginal flora within the mother's vagina is specifically hormonally, naturally. This is just, how we're made by intelligent design. But we're supposed to be born through the vaginal canal and inoculated. Inoculated means that the bacteria then seed our digestive tract, come in our nose, come in our mouth, onto our skin. And that has been shown to be positive benefit, a mutualistic benefit for that newborn. That newborn is then going to digest mother's milk better. And it's kind of like the first probiotic organism to then seed the gut. Observationally, this paper was just published a couple of years ago, but starting in the 40s, when C-sections started to become more common, NIH followed a handful, and I can't remember, I think it was a couple thousand, but they followed people after cesarean section to find out what sort of health diseases and risks that they had later in life. And so this was an over, 60 something years. And what they found is that being born by C-section, your likelihood of developing type 2 diabetes rose by 46%.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. And there's a lot of other variables at play. But when, you do statistics and you try to map out all these analyses, otherwise having as many patients as you possibly can, and then trying to just reduce it down to just characteristics. Again, it's a longitudinal observational study, but wow, 46% increased risk of having type 2 diabetes simply by being born by C-section as a major variable. And in the 1940s, we didn't have the number of antibiotics that we have now. We weren't being given them left and right like we are now. In healthcare, especially in my field with metabolism, obesity, and weight loss surgery, we know that diabetes and obesity go hand in hand. But diabetes was actually more prevalent than obesity in this longitudinal study.
Interesting. Because of my background, I would always fight with my wife. I'm like, we're not giving kids antibiotics at least for the first 3-4 days, because your body is designed to fight it off. There's a reason your body has a temperature. It's the natural healing system. Stop messing with that system. And a lot of parents just, and I get why doctors do it, but they take antibiotics like candy when the kids are little. And you're messing with all of the systems. And on top of that, kids in this country eat, you know what? So it's not exactly perfection. We were a bit better at that, and I've learned a lot since then. But, you know, next time around with grandkids, we'll be even more careful and more connected with that. And that goes for adults too. Like, antibiotics have their place. They are not candy, and they are not without risk benefit, just like anything else. And that's the other thing, because like, for whatever reason, my kids grew up with, you got to wash your hands a million times and all this. I'm like, bacteria are good. Like, we have a symbiotic relationship with them, and people seem to be so worried about it. And I don't know what the current studies were, but I remember reading that kids who grew up playing in dirt, kids who were more exposed to just natural whatever and weren't kept in a sterile environment were less likely to develop allergies, less likely to develop asthma and those types of things, because your body's got to fight something. And if there's nothing to fight, it fights good.
Yeah. And that same information was also extrapolated from the C-section population. So those born by C-section, their immune systems were more reactive. You know, the biggest immune or collection of immune systems or immune glands that we have are right there within the gut wall. And so, you know, we're constantly, like, your gut is akin to your skin, you know, whatever we're touching on the outside, and there's natural protective mechanisms here on our skin to help protect us. Same thing on the inside of our body as well.
Well, and that was my other thing. If you keep washing your hands with antibiotic soap, you'll kill off the easy to kill bacteria. The ones that you don't kill will start to get stronger and thrive. And they're the ones that you can't kill, which creates a whole nother issue. Well,
yeah. And that's, you know, it's where antibiotic resistance is also a problem, you know? And so we can, it's just everything that we do as intelligent beings from the perspective of science, the perspective of treating a problem, there's always a downstream effect, and everything's a double-edged sword, you know? So I think, educating yourself, observing the natural world is really important.
It is. So let's kind of take this a step deeper. And I want to talk about the actual connections between the gut and the brain. And then from there, I think we'll even continue on to the nervous system, digestion, and how all of this kind of comes together.
Absolutely. What got me excited about all this was when I was in medical school, I was experiencing panic attacks and a lot of anxiety and depression, but subclinical. I didn't even really notice that I didn't even know that I was really feeling this way until I wasn't anymore. And, you know, med school is kind of a stressful environment. I'm taking 13 exams every 2 weeks. I'm studying hours and hours. And at this time, I was in my early 20s. I was already very nutritionally aware and ate really well. I was already exercising and was still exercising, but I was still having all these overwhelming feelings of despair. There's some trauma stuff in there too, but, you know, c'est la vie. Every single human has their own version of, you know, trauma and their own personal awareness to how that's impacting them. At the time, I ended up finding a functional medicine practitioner, and we did saliva tests, blood tests, stool tests. And so if anybody on your podcast today is listening and they're like, oh yeah, I'm really curious about what's going on with my body, I highly recommend going to ifm.org. It's the Institute of Functional Medicine. And this is just a style of medicine that nurse practitioners, chiropractors, dietitians, medical doctors can partake in this level of education. And it's all this really upstream nutritional processing, upstream biological, biochemical processing. And you can really learn a lot about how your body is functioning in a moment in time. Well, I found out that I had a gut parasite. I had small bowel bacterial overgrowth, and I had yeast overgrowth. Basically, everything that could be wrong with the gut, I had it, which felt good. It gave me validation. And it was also very easy to treat. And so I did have to take a parasitical drug to get rid of the parasite. I had to go off my birth control pills because birth control is it's no longer effective when you're taking these kind of antibiotics and medications anyway. And I have another theory about how that impacted me, because there's been evidence to suggest that when we suppress a woman's natural hormonal biochemistry, that there's gut effects. So needless to say, within about 6 weeks, I got the light back behind my eyes. All my panic attacks went away. I became just really, really invigorated. All my energy came back, and I never looked back. So when I then got propositioned to give a lecture on the connection between gut health, nutrition, and chronic pain, and this is part of an Oregon collaborative group called the Oregon Pain Alliance. But there's a lot of emerging awareness that our brains are so good at processing threat and safety in our environment that even something like chronic pain is a version of a post-traumatic stress reaction to your stress response. We have emotions, we have thoughts, we have beliefs, we have the real threat of like a car accident, a lion, a tiger, a bear, but we also just have normal day-to-day stress like a miscommunication with a partner, being late for work, etc. So layering all these things in together, in order for digestion to work appropriately, you have to have a vagus nerve, brain down system that is telling you that it's okay to eat. It's okay to digest your food. And that's where having, it's called parasympathetic nervous system state. But in order for us to appropriately digest our food, take in the information, have digestion work appropriately, we need to be in this nervous system state. The gut-brain connection really got put on the map in about 2016. So all the experiences that I was going through, that was like in 2008, 2010. So there was none of this literature at the time to really support this gut-brain connection, but it all just spilled out of the academic centers in about 2016. So looking at rat models, a lab rat, again, they're genetically identical. Their environment's relatively stable. They eat the same kind of food. It's very easy to control this small mammal, which we're more complex than rats, but it's a good model to imply how all mammals work. But they put them in beakers of water, and they called it the stress test. And they would more or less stress this rat. This rat was swimming, and they would time when the rat would give up swimming. And so that was like, survival stress. This rat thinks it's going to die. It's swimming in a beaker of water and it's trying to get out. Well, then they gave, so that's the control group, and they timed it. Then they gave this other group of rats, genetically similar, all the other factors sort of controlled for. But then they gave them probiotics, Lactobacillus rhamnosus. It's a common probiotic. It's added to a lot of our dairy products in America. And just this one probiotic additive significantly increased the amount of time that rat was comfortable swimming. So statistical significance, I can't tell you the exact time, but they swam and swam and swam. So this is the lab study version showing that there's a beneficial relationship between our probiotic organisms in our food and our nervous system. They took it a step further and they thought, okay, what if we cut the vagus nerve? Now, I'm a general surgeon. I have cut the vagus nerve. You do it to prevent acid hypersecretion in the stomach. It's a means to help prevent stomach ulcers. And again, this whole connection about what state your nervous system is in, how well you digest your food, the presence of an ulcer, it's all connected. So then when they cut the vagus nerve, despite giving the rodents the probiotics, they all reverted back to the same timeline of stress of petering out and not doing very well. So then probiotics got relabeled in the scientific community as psychobiotics. And then it really catapulted because they affect our brain chemistry, they affect our resilience, they affect our stress response. And it really catapulted this other field of research to just examine, okay, well, if one probiotic strain is good, what are multiple probiotic strains doing? What is the impact in humans? And what is the role of the vagus nerve? So there's a really awesome physician and neuroscientist out of California his name is Imran Meyer. And I've heard him lecture a couple of times. He's written great books, but he can really map it out for you just how intimate this connection is between the vagus nerve, these bacterial organisms that inhabit our gut, how we get them from the environment naturally or artificially. Again, everything is happening. Technology is good. We can augment our lives now to, mimic that of a hunter-gatherer. And just the connection between the immune system, which layers into all those pediatric allergy connections, our endocrine system, which mirrors into different neurotransmitters and hormones, which we take in the precursors through food. So we have to have certain nutrition from our food. We have to have certain digestive capacity to break it down. So I heard a really good analogy from Dr. O'Brien. He's another medical doctor out there in the functional medicine space that speaks out a lot about the impact of gluten. But he describes it as like, imagine your food is like a pearl necklace. And you want the body to be able to break it down into individual pearls. An individual pearl is what then gets absorbed, taken across the cell membrane, processed by your body, goes to your liver, and then it's redistributed throughout the rest of the body. But when we have digestion that isn't optimally functioning, so we're not perfectly in the parasympathetic state, we're experiencing stress, we're experiencing trauma, we're late for work, we're not eating the right things, then our body then becomes kind of leaky and we're absorbing multiple pearls at a time. Those multiple pearls mimic and look like other proteins in the body. And then your immune system starts to attack them as if they're a foreign thing. And then you start getting your own body's immune system attacking other parts of it. And so that's where the inflammation, that's where the joint pain, that's where a lot of things can kind of spill out from that. Another fun fact about the vagus nerve is for every one nerve fiber going from the brain to the gut, there's 9 going from the gut back up to the brain. And so all of these little pieces are just being more clearly mapped out. But the reality is the human organism hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is our environment, our technological advances, the pressure we put on ourselves, how much we work, our disconnection from each other outside of the home, and the stresses and the traumas of day-to-day life. And so taking it all together, if we're not eating enough fiber, plant-rich food, enough healthy natural foods, then we're really not feeding our own internal ecosystem, which has this huge protective effect to prevent ourselves from experiencing stress to this point in the first place. And so it's just this whole biofeedback loop. And I can really speak to this from that personal perspective of passion and self-acceptance. I experienced it. I know what it's like to have a completely dysregulated gut, environment and be under tremendous amounts of stress and feel so awful. Here I am on the other side. My gut environment is fantastic. Life stress still happens. I mean, I'm a surgeon, I'm on call. There's outcomes, complications. We're talking about money. We're talking about, all these other things. Life still happens. Nothing about my life has really changed, but my internal environment, my ability to have resiliency has increased 100-fold.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And let's just touch on this. Do you think how you're looking at this as a doctor is the norm, or are you an outlier?
I'm definitely an outlier, but like I said, it's very endearing that functional medicine exists and that there is an entire branch or field of medicine that views food as medicine. You know, let food be thy medicine is a Hippocrates quote from ancient times, and it has stood the test of time. So knowing that you even had a physician who recognized that when the diet wasn't appropriately tuned to, because we are creatures of habit, and they see this all the time in the clients that I serve with obesity, and even after bariatric surgery, we eat the same thing every day because we like it. And so when you're eating the same thing every day, you're really not doing the body enough justice, because it really does take a variety of nutrients to really create that internal ecosystem that then feeds the diversity and the level of bacteria that you need in healthy numbers to then support your whole organism.
And I've heard you say that 90% of disease is actually tied to the biome.
Yes. And, 90% is definitely a ballpark figure. But I mean, I would say like Huntington's disease, which is a neurologic, genetic, you're born with this genetic mutation, and then gradually, or like muscular dystrophy. Those are things that I would say science hasn't yet been able to trace back to the microbiome. But all of the things that are expressed through epigenetic changes or like cancers are microbiome related. There's mechanisms by the gut bacteria that produce beneficial metabolites just being a chemical. That chemical is then healthy food for the cell. And then your own cells, as they're transcribing and changing and replicating and making new copies, the healthy environment from in the gut makes healthy new cells.
I don't know how true this is, because I don't know the reality, but they used to say in China, maybe they still do, to women who got breast cancer, oh, you must be rich. Because of the food, they would come back to food, because the rest of the people couldn't eat this rich food that then led to that. And again, I don't know if it's true or not. It's just something I remember hearing.
Well, and that kind of also parallels with like why we're seeing such rising rates of obesity in the Middle East, where McDonald's is now the status symbol.
That's a shame, because that's really not a status symbol.
Yeah. Again, we don't have all the answers mapped out. What I look at, or what kind of excites me, is just what is our natural process? And can we study the natural process without human intervention? And what can we observe from that? And then now in our modern world, with all of our modern stuff and all of our technological advances, which have enriched life and made it fun and fascinating, how can we also be in our artificial environment, but also coax our way back to feeling more natural within it?
What are some simple things that people can do with their diet to at least start to move in the right direction? Because, people say eat fruits and vegetables. It's my understanding that an apple in the grocery store has had a long time between when it was picked, when it showed up, and it's not naturally ripened. It's chemically altered. So, what do we do?
Yeah. This is where you want to explore. And again, the internet is a good place for this, but you can explore community-supported agriculture. So it's called a CSA, and just find out where the closest one is to you. And you start getting direct shipments farm to you. Maybe it's a box that you pick up. Usually there's a drop location, but that would be the first place to start, because you are 100% correct in that just the way that our supermarkets are now organized, our food has to travel a very long, long way. It's often picked before it's even ripe. My daughter will not eat a blueberry or a raspberry that comes from our supermarket. So you also have to be patient. You have to reflect on, okay, well, what's in season? And that's where I think the CSA boxes are a perfect place to start, because it's very reflective of what they're actually growing. Now, we can have greenhouses, and if they're growing awesome things, fruits and vegetables, a variety of them that are traditionally only summer-based things, but they've lengthened their growing season because of a greenhouse. Awesome. You now have living, natural, fresh food coming into your body. On that notion of freshness, there's always like a new wave or a new thing every few years that kind of comes out in the diet allergy space. And the most recent one that caught my attention, this has been around for a few years now, but it's histamine. So having a histamine response from eating fruits and vegetables in high histamine foods. And just as you just commented in that the apples sit in cold storage and they're picked before they're ripe, and then they're slowly ripened chemically. But as that's happening, the plant is actively in a decaying process. And so if we're eating spoiled food, then it's going to, again, interact with our immune system in a different way. And we can start having a lot more food intolerances and food allergies to presumably healthy food. And so it gets really sad, because it's kind of like, all right, well, is this some weird industrial conspiracy to make us only eat processed food? And then at the same time, we also kind of have to get excited about SpaceX and, living on Mars and, what it's going to look like when we actually, as humans, as a species, have all this interplanetary, living and travel, because we're kind of in evolution to set ourselves up for being able to live in those environments. Not that, anything's good or bad. It's just the evolution of humans and where we're going.
I mean, I think that's a big part of the problem. And people you think you're eating healthy and you find out you're not. And I will tell you, that is one of the things I'm starting to see. Europe, their politicians are much better about setting better standards for what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Unfortunately,
the European Union does an awesome job. I don't know when the last time was you were in Europe, but there's always greenhouses at the outskirts of, every major city or every small town. The food comes directly from those sources. And they just have a much more grounded, rich culture around food preparation, and their food standard is so much higher than what our standard is here. So we're also complacent.
Well, when food tastes great out of the box, you think it's good for you. And I mean, because I grew up in the 70s, and I know then we were told all kinds of things. I think today people are becoming more aware and people are demanding better. And so like organic has taken off, although organic in and of itself doesn't really mean anything.
I know. Yeah.
So that's not necessarily.
Yeah. Farm fresh as best as you can. U-picks, right? So, again, we're still in the summer season. If there's a U-pick farm or just any local farm, any local garden. I mean, again, where I live is a very magical place. My neighbors have little signs in front of their yard, what things they have in their garden. You can go buy directly from them. And, I don't live in a big city. I live in a, population, 60,000. I live on, half an acre. I have a huge garden myself. I mean, this is really a whole lifestyle for me. And I think if you want to really take control of your health and think about it a little differently, it really is as simple as changing your environment, but being a caretaker of your environment.
And that takes a lot of work.
It does take a lot of work. And I understand that not everybody has that, And so then from there, it's like, okay, well, can I shop at Whole Foods? Can I shop at New Seasons? Can I shop at natural grocers? I just listed the 3 co-ops. So see if your community has a co-op. And your co-op is really going to have the best local organic or, maybe not organic. It isn't, again, organic is kind of now this label that just implies healthy, but it's becoming its own bag of industry that isn't always necessarily means what it's intended to mean.
Correct. And it's funny because I learned a lot from Dr. Gundry, and they talk about labels. So free range literally means that there is a open door to the chicken coop. It doesn't mean that the chicken's actually free ranged. Grass-fed beef just means at some point in their life, they were fed grass. Now they have the next thing, which is grass finished, because what they tend to do is the animals are all given corn at the end, because the fastest way to make you fat is to fill you up with corn. So, and you start to think, well, if that happens, then what are you really eating? And what's it doing to you, even though you think you're doing right?
Yeah, well, like what's killing all the vultures? It's that same notion of biological magnification. Yeah, I know it feels like a big hurdle, but you just got to do your research. And if you can just go straight to the farmer themselves, you can mail order stuff. It can come on dry ice. You can get a box. This is why there's a big movement to be more plant-based, is because a lot of people are finding it really challenging to find, animal protein that's raised in this really, humane, natural kind of way. And even that is a worrisome concept for me, because you got, companies out there that it's just processed chemicals packaged from soy, or, and so it's still not the most ideal.
Well, I would say I'll call it fake meat.
Yeah.
Yeah. That, again, you're back to factory food.
Exactly.
And when you start to read the ingredients inside of it, you're like, oh, that isn't exactly what I thought. And again, it's all designed for taste and texture, not necessarily for health. And so figuring that out. And so, yeah, I know I've struggled with this and trying to figure out what's real, what's not real. And then at the end of the day, the cost of real food is astronomical.
So the very first question you asked me, which is, did we talk about money and all these things? My father is still under the dogma that, everything, you need to buy the best value. So everything's for the best value. This is why people shop at Costco, because of the value that they get. This is why we're served giant portions at, American diners, is because it's the best value. But value doesn't come in volume or the cheapest thing on the menu. The value comes in reading the nutrition label, reading the ingredients, researching the brand so that you feel comfortable. If Kellogg keeps buying up all of the presumed, natural food, Kashi, for example, used to be an independent company. Cliff Bar used to be an independent company. They've all been bought up. And anyway, it's just, it is really fascinating. You follow the money, you follow the big brands. And once you find a big brand that, they make all this other stuff, and you really find out, what goes into it, then maybe you're a little more apprehensive. You talk about political stuff. There was a really good documentary that came out right when I was going through all of my major gut dysfunction. And I was in the process of writing a grant, a public health grant, to start community gardens, because I've been a big gardener and, again, just love the whole process. This is before I understood all the different tiny microorganisms that lived in my gut and how greatly they appreciate my direct to farm, direct from soil into my body lifestyle. But Food Inc., if anybody has ever seen Food Inc., it's a really, really good documentary that explores these notions of what we're talking about. How meat is processed, how food is processed, how food is packaged, and then just the biological impact, the environmental impact, and then how to vote with your dollars. So I know you care greatly about finance and financial wellness, but your health and how you invest in your health and how you invest in your body is how you're going to ensure that you're going to have a sharp mind and be around long enough to build that generational wealth for your family. If you're getting sick early, have a lot of medical expenses, have to go on disability, and you end your working life prematurely, then you're not really going to get there anyway.
And yeah, you can give up your health to make money, and then you give up all your money to get your health back. And it doesn't always work so well.
Exactly.
It's that back and forth fight, right? Which never seems to go well. Are there any topics we should have covered we didn't get a chance to today?
There's so many segues I can take you down. I keep talking about stress, and stress is a big impact. There was a study that actually came out in the 90s, and this was done on dogs. So dogs are other mammals, but it mapped the hormonal process of corticotropin releasing hormone that's secreted by the brain and in response to stress. And so our bodies, that vagus nerve is intimately linked to our eyes, to our ears, to our nose, to our taste, to our vocal cords. So we actually are constantly in reciprocity with other human beings in an ability to help co-regulate somebody or cause stress in them and dysregulate them. And you can think about, being yelled at as a kid, being yelled at by your boss, being yelled at by your partner. None of that feels good. But when we talk calmly, soothingly, mothers with babies singing lullabies, holding, squeezing, rocking, all of that is a regulatory, positive hormonal experience that puts you into that I am safe, I am relaxed, I can digest my food kind of state. So in the study, by stressing these dogs, they found out that the corticotropin releasing hormone releases histamine. I mentioned histamines earlier. Histamine is the same chemical in the body that gets flared up when we get runny noses, when we get allergies. We take antihistamines, aka Benadryl, when we have an allergic reaction. So this histamine response gets exaggerated in the body when we have this stress. And at the gut level, we have receptors for this histamine, and it cleaves the proteins that hold our gut cells together. So this is how you get leaky gut. Everybody's going to get leaky gut every single day with every little bit of stress that you have. There's a certain amount that's physiologic for you. That's the stress that gets you out of bed, that keeps you awake, that lets you exercise. Tells you to breathe fast when you need to breathe fast. But there's a certain amount of stress that isn't good for the body, or at least tips it over this little range. And then it's up to us to recover quickly. So I would say nobody's going to be exempt from stress. Like I said, I'm an adult, 2 kids, busy job, and I do experience stress. But my ability to now recover is so much more stronger because of my total understanding and this farm-based sort of diet that I live. So our ability to not experience high peaks of stress or recover quickly closes those tight junction proteins and is one of the best ways to prevent these dietary gut-related issues to leaky gut. Medications are a big one. Ibuprofen, Aleve, naproxen, aspirin. All your antidepressants negatively impact the microbiome. Hormonal stuff negatively impact the microbiome. We're just feeding the problem in healthcare. Our chronic medicine is keeping us chronically sick.
And therein lies the issues with all of this stuff.
I know. It's so complex.
It's so complex. And
Double-edged sword. You can prevent a stroke, by lowering somebody's blood pressure, but
so true. Well, people got to figure it out, see what works for them, and go from there. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
I would say probably my just observing the natural world around me. You know, when you connect with nature and you're connecting with soil and seeds and water, you recognize that abundance is all over the place. And so by creating this little garden in my backyard, you see abundance pour in. You see 3 different bee species, 7 different bird species. And so it's just like showing up in reciprocity, being a caretaker of my body, caretaker of my family, caretaker of the dirt and the earth and the soil around me. You know, and I love using money analogy to water analogy, you know, letting it flow. And that's my secret.
We had a love-hate relationship with our garden because we have deer and rabbits and all kinds of other animals that seem to like my garden just as much as I did. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Patience. I think that, you know, when you come from a scarcity mindset and you believe that you have to work really hard to get things and that you need more things to be more happy, you realize that you're just kind of chasing your tail. And so patience, taking time away from learning, taking time to observe, taking time to do nothing, and just, you know, being patient.
I get it. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Tomorrow will be different.
It will. It's constantly changing. You don't know. And honestly, the biggest thing I think, just based on our conversation, is most 18-year-olds don't worry about their health.
No. But they do worry about diet, and they worry about diet from, you know, largely body image stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I see that a lot in my bariatric surgery practice, just the really disordered thinking and the negative thought loops that people put themselves in, you know, wanting to be 5 pounds thinner, you know, and then self-sabotaging, and then, you know, not taking care of their body. So then they, you know, and then they do all the wrong things, you know, and then it just gets away from you entirely.
Never easy. If people would like to learn more about you and follow up, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yes, thank you so much for asking. So I am co-founder of artofbariatrics.com, where I serve anybody who's ever experienced bariatric surgery or is considering bariatric surgery through online education and all of this wonderful gut health stuff. If you are overweight and have been given a diagnosis of obesity and you need help, I highly, highly, highly recommend our courses, our meal plans, and our bundled support. It's a growing industry, and I am on a mission to normalize it and to give everybody the correct information so that they can learn how to heal themselves from the inside out. Anybody who goes to our website and decides to purchase one of our courses or meal plans, if they use the discount code podcast20, you get 20% off.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Rocky.
There is so much money in food and medicine, and the people in government who should protect us are failing miserably. The links between our gastrointestinal system, immune function, nervous system, and even mental health are truly fascinating. It's clear that optimizing our microbiome needs to be a priority, on par with diet, exercise, lifestyle, and habits. I hope you learned something from this episode and have a new appreciation of just how crucial your gut flora is for health. Whether you choose to someone who's a functional medicine practitioner or just figure out how to do it on your own, figure out to make healthy lifestyle choices, that is awesome. Dr. La Vella has a ton of stuff that she offers for free. She's got some great YouTubes on her site to teach you and go much, much deeper into what we did today. By the way, if you know someone who might benefit from listening to this episode, would you do me a favor and share it? I would appreciate that. Next week, we've got Damon Eddy. We're going to talk about living a purposeful life. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.